With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Okay, let's get into it. Thursday, June 12th, 1225.
Yeah.
Something pretty major hit the digital world.
Yeah, you probably felt it, right? Maybe an app wasn't working, music cut out, messages just wouldn't send.
Exactly. And what looked like just, random glitches everywhere turned out to be this huge cascade.
Yeah.
And it all started from an outage at, well, one of the absolute pillars of the internet, Google Cloud Platform.
That's the core of it. We've got your sources here, articles, notes, reports, and our goal for this deep dive is really to unpack all that.
What?
To figure out what really went down that day, why it mattered so much, and honestly what it tells us about how interconnected and maybe how fragile the online world we rely on actually is.
It's all about those hidden connections, isn't it?
Yeah.
The stuff running under the hood that powers everything you do online.
Absolutely. And when one of those core bits has a problem...
I see the ripples everywhere. So let's dive into these sources. Where did it all begin?
Well, the epicenter, the main event, according to the sources, was definitely that global outage affecting Google Cloud Platform, GCP. That was the trigger for most of the chaos you might have seen.
Yeah, we have a timeline.
Yep, pretty clear from the reports. The main issue hit roughly between 18.49 BST and 21.49 BST on June 12th.
Okay, so for people in the central U.S., that's like right in the middle of the afternoon, 1.49 p.m., stretching into the early evening, almost 5 p.m. prime time.
Exactly. And what's really surprising, based on what Google themselves confirmed in the sources, the actual cause.
It wasn't like a cyber attack or a fiber cut.
Google said it was an invalid automated quota update to our API management system, which was distributed globally.
Oh, okay, hold on. An automated system update messed up?
Yeah, causing external API requests to be rejected. Basically a piece of software that automatically manages access limits.
Just got it wrong. And that caused all this.
It sounds almost mundane, right? But think about it. That API management system is like the gatekeeper for countless digital requests hitting Google services. APIs, those are the building blocks, how a software talks.
So the automated gatekeepers accidentally put up a global stop sign for tons of essential digital traffic.
You got it. And that immediately slammed Google's own stuff first. The sources list Google Chat, Gmail, Drive, Docs.
I saw reports mentioning spikes for Google Meet too, even if it wasn't like a full-blown red alert outage for Meet specifically.
Right. And core tools for developers using GCP, like the Google Cloud Console, started throwing out 503 errors, which basically means service unavailable to anyone trying to connect.
And this wasn't just like one data center.
No, the sources are clear. It was global. Reports came in from regions in Africa, Asia, Taiwan, South Korea, India, Australia, Europe, Finland, Italy, Germany, Canada, the US. Pretty much worldwide impact.
Okay, but Google did jump on it quickly.
They did. According to the sources, they worked fast to bypass that faulty offending quota check. That allowed most regions to start recovering within about 2 hours.
Most regions.
Yeah, the sources flag a specific issue in the Central 1 region. Recovery took much longer there.
What was that?
Seems like the system that handles the specific quota rules for that region, the quota policy database, got overloaded when they tried to fix things, like a bottleneck.
Ah, okay. So even after the main fix, some things were still shaky for a bit, what Google called moderate residual impact.
Exactly. And Google's public response. The sources say they apologized, acknowledged the disruption, and crucially promised a full incident report.
Detailing the root cause, the timeline, and importantly, the robust remediation steps to prevent it happening again.
Which, is super important for them. They're in this huge competition with AWS and Microsoft Azure. Reliability is everything in the cloud business.
Absolutely. Okay, so Google Cloud itself is struggling. Now, talk about the ripple effect. This is where it gets really widespread, right?
Oh, yeah. This is where you see the cascade. That GCT outage immediately knocked over tons of popular apps and services that are built on Google's infrastructure.
And you could literally watch it happen in real time on sites like Down Detector.
Exactly. The sources point to these massive spikes in user reports hitting Down Detector for all sorts of services, perfectly lined up with the GCP problems.
So who got hit? What did the sources say?
Well, a big one was Spotify. Huge global music service. experienced a major outage. We're talking tens of thousands of user reports.
And people quickly figured out it was tied to Google Cloud.
Yeah, reports linked it directly. The big question online was just, is Spotify down?
Okay, well,
Discord, the chat platform, widespread issues there too. Users couldn't upload attachments, embeds weren't working, even things like activities were failing.
I saw some reports saying even direct messages were glitching, showing as disabled when they weren't.
That's right. And Discord's own status page basically confirmed it was linked to an underlying problem, which everyone understood to mean GCP.
Snapchat, too.
Snapchat also faced downtime, yeah. User reports and Down Detector definitely showed problems around the same time. Though, interestingly, Snapchat's official status page wasn't detailing a specific ongoing cause when reporters checked.
Then there was Replit, the online coding platform. They were pretty direct about it, weren't they?
Incredibly direct. Their statement mentioned their upstream cloud providers having a wide-ranging outage, and they pointed the finger squarely at Google Cloud. It affected their main site, their coding environments, AI features, hosting the works.
What about Twitch? I saw mentions of that.
Yeah, reports on some news sites like Mint indicated Twitch was also caught up in the wider outage. Their own status page mentioned identified web issues, a bit more general, but the timing fit.
The sources also mentioned Fubo, the streaming service. And there were those weird spikes for mobile carriers like Verizon and AT&T on Down Detector.
Right, but that's an important clarification the sources make. Spokespeople for the carriers quickly said their own networks were fine.
So the problem wasn't the phone network itself. It was the apps and services on the internet that people were trying to reach using their phones.
Precisely. The third-party services were down because of GCP, so traffic trying to reach them looked like a problem, but it wasn't the carrier's fault.
Okay, so GCP was clearly the main domino, but the sources say things were even more complicated that day. Cloudflare and AWS were also in the mix.
Yeah, this adds another layer. While GCP was the big story, Cloudflare also had its own separate significant service outage on the very same day, June 12th.
Wait, separate, not just a ripple from Google.
Mostly separate, yes. Cloudflare said their outage hit a bunch of their critical services. Workers, KV, Warp, Access, Images, parts of their dashboard.
And their cause was different.
Completely different, according to them. They attributed it to a failure in the underlying storage infrastructure used by our workers' KV service. So a problem with their own internal database system.
Okay, but didn't the sources mention some link to Google Cloud for Cloudflare?
There's a small nuance there, yeah. A Cloudflare rep did mention that a limited number of services at Cloudflare use Google Cloud and were impacted.
Ah, okay. So a tiny piece of Cloudflare was affected by the GCP outage, but their main big outage that day was their own internal issue.
Exactly. It just shows how layered these dependencies can get. Bad timing, too, having both happen simultaneously.
No kidding. And then there was AWS, Amazon Web Services. Down Detector showed spikes for them, too.
It did, which, adds to the confusion. But the AWS response, according to the sources, was pretty firm.
What did they say?
An AWS rep stated flat out they were operating normally, and those user reports on Down Detector were not accurate.
And did their official status pages back that up?
Yeah, the reports noted that AWS's service health dashboards looked much calmer compared to the chaos on Google Cloud side.
So the conclusion from the sources on AWS?
Likely just localized issues, maybe problems on the user's end or specific client-side things, not a widespread AWS platform outage like we've sometimes seen in the past.
Okay, wow. So let's zoom out. You've got this massive Google Cloud failure causing chaos for countless apps.
Yeah.
You've got Cloudflare having its own major unrelated failure on the same day. And you've got confusing, probably unrelated reports about AWS. What does this whole mess on June 12th tell us about, well, the internet we use constantly?
I mean, if you wanted a stark reminder, this was it. It really highlights the incredible interconnectedness, but also the inherent vulnerability of the whole system.
It's like you don't realize how much relies on these few foundational pillars until one of them shakes.
Precisely. It shows how one failure, even something seemingly technical and small like that invalid automated quota update at a single major cloud provider,
Can just instantly ripple outwards, affecting millions of people globally, hitting services they use for work, for talking to friends, for entertainment.
And the reason it cascades like that is because such a huge chunk of the modern internet runs on just a handful of these giant platforms, GCP, AWS, Azure.
Creates these massive potential single points of failure, doesn't it?
It does. Now, obviously, these companies invest billions in redundancy and resilience. They're designed to handle failures.
But the scale is just immense. And the complexity.
Exactly. The sheer scale and complexity mean that even apparently minor internal issues can sometimes have these outsized global consequences. Nobody's perfect, even at that scale.
It also kind of highlights how quickly we all know about it now, right?
Yeah.
Going down detector lights up, the chatter on social media.
Absolutely. It shows the power of that real-time public awareness. And it really underscores why it's so vital for these providers to have super rapid response plans and, importantly, clear, transparent communication through their status pages. So you're not left wondering if your internet's broken or if, half the web is.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up this deep dive, pulling from all these sources you brought. The big event, that global Google Cloud outage on June 12, 2025.
Right. Hammered Google's own services, then cascaded out to major third parties like Spotify, Discord, Replit, and others.
And then, adding to the chaos, Cloudflare had its own separate major outage the same day from a different internal cause.
The whole day was just a really potent, real-world demonstration of how deeply dependent we are on this cloud infrastructure.
And maybe how fragile that complex system can sometimes be.
Yeah, fragile might be the right word. Despite all the engineering, it's still vulnerable.
And the sources note Google got the main issue fixed and is doing that full post-mortem promising improvements.
Which is what you'd expect, yeah. They have to learn from this.
But it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? As we push more and more of everything, our work, our entertainment, critical infrastructure onto these huge centralized cloud platforms, events like this really drive home the need for constant vigilance, for incredibly fast response plans. And maybe, as some of the implications in the sources suggest, we need to think more seriously about diversifying how the Internet's foundations are built.
It's a huge question. What does this really mean for the future design, the future stability of this digital world we all live in now? Definitely something to think about as you click around online today.